So, if you weren't already familiar, there are six major stages of a relationship. And the very beginning stages are actually a very small snapshot in time compared to the entirety of the relationship itself. And this is based off of the work of Dr. Susan Johnson. And she talks about the five stages of a relationship. And what I've done is just separated out the first two stages because I think there's valuable insight in the first two. So we now have the dating stage of a relationship, which is essentially the vetting stage, the time to get to see if somebody meets our standards, meets our needs, make sure that they don't have any of our non-negotiables, and to see if we can really get along with somebody and enjoy their company enough to make it to the honeymoon stage, which is marked by a stage of exclusivity to the relationship. Then following that, we naturally go into the power struggle stage, which is marked by essentially the rite of passage of getting comfortable enough in the honeymoon stage to let the mask fall and to really let somebody into our lives. Now, after the power struggle stage, if we make it through, which is statistically the stage that couples break up the most around, we then enter into the stability stages, then the commitment and bliss stage. And these are the major six stages. But what I've seen over and over again is largely because of so much unhealthy relationship advice circulating the internet that teaches a little bit more about playing mind games than it does about actually building a secure attachment. People think that a relationship is all about the dating and honeymoon stage, being in this like really immense high where we are getting to know somebody and we have the infatuation and the excitement followed by the chaos of the power struggle stage, and then they experience a breakup in that stage and then resort back to the dating and honeymoon stage with future dating partners and relationships. And what's really difficult about this, as somebody who was fearful avoidant attachment style and really struggled in relationships for quite some time in my early life, what I found is, getting past the power struggle stage is actually what moves the needle from more conditionally based love to more unconditionally based love. Because the signature of the power struggle stage is such that we're supposed to drop the mask. We are supposed to literally let somebody understand our fears and our flaws and our needs. And we're supposed to share them in a vulnerable way and be met with acceptance in a partner and vice versa. And in doing that, we actually allow ourselves to be loved more without conditions. Whereas in the dating and honeymoon stages, we still are loving, ourselves. We're sharing ourselves with certain conditions. So, what is a little bit tragic in a sense is how much advice is on the internet that talks a lot about playing mind games, ideas like play hard to get or love will solve everything or don't be vulnerable, use these specific lines and tactics to win somebody over. And these ideas of, okay, well, we'll use these specific tactics or lines, and that may be something that benefits you in the dating stage and in keeping somebody's attention, but it actually sets you up for a huge downfall in the power struggle stage. Because if what we've been sharing is such a far jump away from who we truly are because we've been putting on a front and we've been, digging into relationships from a space of manipulation in a sense and playing mind games, then by the time we actually get into that comfort in the power struggle stage and start to let that mask drop, suddenly we're going to be in a position where who we are is so different from who we are in those dating and honeymoon stages. And it's going to make the already challenging power struggle stage that much more difficult and statistically that much less likely that we make it through. So what I want to share with you is, unpacking some of these pieces of advice and talking about some of the differences here between these mind games in a relationship from a modern dating perspective versus actually building a secure attachment in a relationship and what that looks like and why we should be focusing on getting to the bliss stage of a relationship through healthy tactics rather than focusing on how we keep somebody's attention in the early stages of relationships, which in and of themselves are often forms of self abandonment. So let's look at this idea of playing hard to get. I understand where it comes from. I absolutely understand where it comes from. But what I think from this perspective is when we are playing hard to get, what we are usually doing is we are rather than sharing our true selves and what our standards are and coming into a dating experience from a place of confidence. So I'll share with you just from a personal perspective, honestly, because I was somebody who was fearful of avoidant. I was somebody who, to some degree, at least subconsciously, was doing some of these things in relationships versus what it's like to be kind of on the other side of this here. And I know for me, as a fearful avoidant at one point, I was afraid to open up, right? So I would be like, okay, play hard to get in the sense of, don't, I was always holding back, right? I was always scared to be vulnerable. I was always like pulling away. And, you know, I would do this thing in the experience of dating where I would be interested in somebody, but I wouldn't show it because I was afraid to open up. Whereas as I became more secure and did the work to become securely attached, part of what that meant was me learning what my needs were in a relationship and what my standards were and what my non-negotiables were. And there's a huge difference between going into dating and assessing your standards and upholding them versus playing hard to get. So let's say, for example, that myself, when I didn't know what my standards were in relationships, maybe I wanted somebody to communicate more consistently, for example, but rather than communicating that that was important to me and that was a standard that I was looking for, instead, I would just withdraw as well. Okay, they're not going to communicate. Fine, I'm not going to communicate either. And I would just pull away. And what that led to was just challenges in dating and also me being in a position where I didn't know what it was that I wanted and didn't allow somebody to see what I wanted either. But as I started investigating what I was looking for, what was important and meaningful to me around dating, instead of playing hard to get, if something wasn't up to my standards, I would communicate my standards. If somebody wasn't willing to meet them or show up for them in a healthy way, then I would realize this isn't the right fit for me and I shouldn't be wasting my time. And my relationship to it was coming from a place of health rather than from a place of mind games, right? From a place of like, don't be vulnerable, pull back because they're pulling back. And this weird dance that, in my opinion, having lived in that was fairly toxic. Whereas me being able to communicate what it is that I was looking for, what it is that I needed, I could totally understand if a person was in a place to give that. And I could respect that, but I could also move on and not waste my own valuable time because our time is so precious and valuable. So we're getting all this information, things like, oh, play hard to get, but there's a much healthier way, which is about understanding your standards, your needs. And there's a lot more. Another huge one is this idea of like using specific lines and tactics. I mean, I see this everywhere on the internet. And or another huge one is about, being, only your masculine energy or only your feminine energy. Again, these are principles or ideas that yes, may create attraction in the dating and honeymoon stages, but as soon as we are trying to play a role, as soon as we are using these lines or these tactics, or we are trying to present only certain aspects of ourselves, this is going to, again, help us feel connected in the dating and honeymoon stage. But the moment we go into the power struggle stage and we have to share who we actually are, we make it through the power struggle stage, not by being in extreme polarity, like you will hear from these ideas of masculine and feminine energy. We will make it through the power struggle stage by instead being able to understand what it is that we are looking for, what it is that we are needing, who we are, and actually creating a sense of wholeness in our communication with another person. So if you have, if somebody's so polarized with only their masculine side and somebody's so polarized with their feminine side, what we actually have to recognize is that we can originally be very attracted to trait variety. It is a biological principle of attraction, but trait variety actually, when we get into the power struggle stage, becomes what we resent the most. So I'll give you an example of this. Let's say we have somebody who's more passive, let's say a female, for argument's sake, and a male who's very assertive, right? What happens is that can cause this point of attraction because they're expressing very different traits, the passiveness, the assertiveness, and that can cause this attraction. But then in the power struggle stage, if we don't actually integrate some of those traits that we were originally attracted to in each other, we actually go through something called an infatuation and resentment cycle. And what I mean by this is that we will originally infatuate with the opposing trait, but then we will come to resent it because it will essentially affect us. And an example of this is I've seen with many clients is somebody who's very passive. By the time they're in the power struggle stage, they're like, my partner doesn't meet my needs. My partner has too many boundaries. My partner's not making enough time for me. And they come to resent that assertiveness and that kind of rigidity or directness unless they learn to take on some of that assertiveness and assert themselves and their own needs in communication with their assertive partner as well. And vice versa. If somebody's so assertive and they can't have a degree of passivity that's required for healthy compromise, then again, we'll see friction here that will break a relationship apart. So there's so much information that's telling us to be different than we are, rather than to discover who we are and authentically share that in a vulnerable way with another person so we can find other people in our relationships that are a truthful wonderful match, that are a really good fit. And wherever there's mind games, or, we look at mind games, well, mind games are a form of subconscious manipulation, and we manipulate other people when we don't know how to communicate our needs, because the subconscious mind is a needs meeting machine. And so if you don't know how to just express what you need from somebody, let's just say, for example, we have an anxious attachment style who's needing reassurance, which is a fine need to have in a relationship, perfectly acceptable. But, the AP needs reassurance, and rather than saying to their partner, "Hey, could use some reassurance," maybe they accidentally, from this place of fear, try to make their partner jealous and get a reaction as a form of reassurance. Sure, that may get you a degree of reassurance, but it will also create these long-term detriments that will wear down relationships like rocks, and water rubbing up against rocks. It will wear it down slowly over time, and it will create these detrimental long-term impacts. So we need to learn as individuals how to build secure attachment through learning what our needs are, what our wounds and fears are, and working through reprogramming those wounds and fears, and then being able to communicate openly with other people in our lives what those needs are in a vulnerable way, so that we can exchange our needs, while also knowing what our standards are and what we're truly looking for in relationships, so we can see if one another are a good match. And in doing that, we will be able to enjoy the dating and honeymoon stage, finding the right people and vetting them in the right way, proceed to move on through the power struggle stage with grace, and then further move on to the much longer term phases that a relationship is meant to have, which is the stability, commitment, and bliss stages. And the bliss stage of a relationship is essentially the honeymoon stage, but where you are actually known by your partner. Your fears are known, they are supported, they are understood. You are in a position where, you can communicate your needs, that your partner cares to meet your needs, and vice versa, and you feel truly accepted and loved at a much deeper, much more unconditional level than with all of the conditions intact in the dating stage specifically. So, if you are not familiar with your attachment style, you can take our free attachment style quiz down below, get a full report that will talk to you all about for free, your wounds, your challenges, how to overcome some of these different wounds and challenges. And if you want to do some work to really heal your insecure attachment style and build this secure attachment and know exactly the roadmap and actionable steps to do so, you can check out the attachment style courses that are designed to recondition your attachment style to be secure. And that you can all check out for free for 7 days down below. And also, I'm really excited to share with you that we've actually been working on an app for quite some time, and we're going to be launching that as well. So if you want to come in, check out our new app that we have to take all of your PDS courses from, and all of the new exciting features and benefits in there, check it out. That will also be included when you click the link down below. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for stopping by here today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing, joining our community here on this channel. And thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see you in future videos.